Action.
Great. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your location. So, my name is Mary Jane Encho from Ghana, and I'll be your moderator for the next 2 hours. So, all too soon, we are gradually drawing down the curtains on our 1 month journey on climate finance reporting training section, as today is the final section. So we want to welcome you once again, and we really commend you for your commitment to this process. We've seen the enthusiasm you have with regards to climate finance. A lot of you have a lot of in-depth information or knowledge in sustainable finance, and we know that the climate finance bit of it is also going to enhance your work in moving forward. So without much ado, we would like to get to have your expectations for today. Unfortunately, we couldn't send you the slides as we usually do, but then we hope that you know from the toolkit that was sent what we'll be discussing today. Is going to be on climate finance negotiations and what the working group is doing. So quickly, we would like to have a few of you putting your expectations in the chat room before I hand over to Jen to take us through the Menti processes. So colleagues, if you can hear me, we would want to have your expectations for today, what you're looking forward to getting out of today's section in just 5 minutes. Then I hand over to Jen for the Menti. Sure.
Yeah, tell us how you feel and what you expect this session. It will be great to know this. Irene?
Yeah, I was going to say that I just dropped, or I'm dropping the backdrop for as many people who can use it during the course of the session today. Please oblige. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so maybe because of we need to be very wary of time, we have a secretariat here with us, hoping that we can engage with him very much with our questions. So I am just going to start the Menti now from my side. So I want to please kindly join menti.com and use this code. It's 54837159. If you can please enter the code, the Menti. I'll be writing it in the chat. And the question for today is, what comes to mind when you think of climate finance? We want to know what are these keywords that you can identify from your own previous knowledge before this session, so we can have some inputs for our speaker. Operation, nice. Financial instruments, where is the money? 100 billion, reporting, paying the debt. Mitigation, resilience building, Copenhagen Accord, mysterious, justice. We got someone in the private chat saying Jen. Various players, adaptation funds, international cooperation, international financial architecture, the Global Environmental Facility, innovation, accelerating climate action, cross-cutting issue, relief, opportunities, divest from fossil fuels, accounting, various players' accountability, saving the planet. Indeed, that's very nice answers all. It's pretty much what it's all about. Climate risks, loss and damage fund, climate justice, incremental costs. Amazing. I'm very happy about this. Very, very happy. All right, I thank you so much. We have other mentees. I want to really quickly jump to a second one that our presenter thought it was very relevant as well. So now please join to another mentee because we don't have the paid version. We're all running voluntary on a voluntary budget. So the second mentee, really fast, please. It's going to be about our pre-existing knowledge, but on youth engagement in advocacy inside the UN system. And there is, oh no. Okay, I think the second one is it. Yeah, the second one is the one that we want to know about. How much knowledge do you have about Youngo, but we can make it about Youngo participation in the UNFCCC. We want to really know about this. So, all right. So we got one people that have engaged in a COP or an SBs, 2 people participating on LCOIs, participating in submission processes, quickly growing. We have about 54 participants in this call. So, all right. Many people have participated in Youngo spaces, while others have little to no knowledge. It's really good that we have diversity here so we can form peer-to-peer capacity buildings as well. All right. We have 3 more minutes to use before we start the session. All right. I think this is a fair amount of answers. I hope Kim knows that this is helpful for you. So around 3/4 of our participants have engaged before in Youngo processes. So they have been close to what it is to engage in the UNFCCC. And 5 people have attended either COP or the SBs. So I hope this is useful for you. I'll stop the mentee now and pass it over to Mary Jane to introduce our next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Jane, for the mentee. The statistics look fantastic, and I know it will help the Secretariat in the delivery as we move on. So, colleagues, we have all the speakers for today. The Secretariat is in, and the Secretariat is represented by Mr. Han-Woon Noah Kim. He's the Program Officer at the UNFCCC Finance Division. So Mr. Noah Kim is a Program Officer in the Climate Finance Division in the UNFCCC Secretariat. He supports intergovernmental negotiations on climate finance with a focus on Standing Committee on Finance and Climate Funds under the UNFCCC. So during his career within the Secretariat, he supported works of other finance-related negotiation tracks, including long-term finance, climate finance, and national reporting arrangements under Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the Paris Agreement. Prior to joining the Secretariat, he was an assistant researcher in Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change with a focus on sea level rise studies for Korean Peninsula. Yeah. So he is an alumni of Oxford Adaptation Academy and Korea University. Wow. So colleagues, UNFCCC representative will be covering a lot of topics for us today in about 30 to 40 minutes. Then you have the opportunity to ask him questions or comments on clarities in moving forward. So he will be highlighting on the current climate finance negotiations within the UNFCCC and also on the works of the Standing Committee on Finance and some other topics like the new collective quantified goal. And then also for those of you who have the privilege to be at the COP in Dubai, he is also going to touch on the COP28 climate finance priorities in moving forward, so we can help you in your engagement at the COP. So without much ado, I leave the floor for Noah Kim to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those introduction. Hello to everyone. My name is Noah, as introduced. It's a pleasure to address the Youngo participants today in this very important academy. It's nice to speak to Youngo participants because indeed we really look forward to engaging more with Youngo in the intergovernmental process on climate finance, because other constituencies like Engo and Bingo, and we have a lot of Ngos in the process, and we really hope to hear more from the youth, because the importance of youth voice in the climate finance sphere is growing, and we need more strategic interventions from you, and why your voice matter in the UNFCCC process. So I hope I can contribute my 10 cents in this effort by sharing with you an introduction really on climate finance from the FCCC perspective, because climate finance itself is such a broad and deep topic. By no means in this 30 minutes will be enough to cover it all. But what I intend to make is at least give you a taste of what it is, at least from the FCCC perspective, so that the next time you read something on climate finance at the COP and FCCC discussions on the negotiations, at least I hope this presentation will act as a guidebook or navigation, if you like. At least you can pinpoint like, what I read in this material from the outcomes or what's going on in Dubai, it belongs to this and that category of information that I hope to share with you today. And of course, outside this 30 minutes, I hope this really is a conversation between us, not really a top-down approach of, sharing the information from me to you, but rather a conversation between us, so that I really look forward to the Q&A session that we'll have at the end of the session. So I'm given 30 minutes to run over the materials that I have prepared. So I'm going to share my screen now. I've prepared a few slides, which I hope will be helpful for you to follow the discussions. So this is the 5 chapters, if you like, of today's presentation that I will share with you today, in 5 broad topics. First, I will introduce you to climate finance. Again, I know you are familiar with the issue of sustainable finance and private sector finance, but it can be a little bit different sight from the FCCC perspective. So I'll share with that. And next, I will share with you a useful diagram that's called Mobilization, Delivery, and Oversight of Climate Finance. What I personally call is the Trinity of Climate Finance from the FCCC perspective. Thirdly, I will share with you the process of new collective quantifiable goal. In short, we call it NCQG, but basically that's the next 100 billion, if you like, next quantified number on climate finance that parties will agree to next year, not this year, and maybe a taste of that and how that's going. 4th topic is the Standing Committee on Finance. Some of you might know, some of you might not. This is a dedicated committee under the UNFCCC that acts as an advisory body to the COP in making decisions on climate finance. It's similar to any kind of national congress. There's always subcommittees that help parliament to make decisions and make laws. It's similar under the UNFCCC. There's a committee on climate finance, that makes recommendation to the COP on various decisions that the COP will make. So a little bit of introduction to that, and finally, the climate finance issues that awaits all of us in Dubai. So these are the 5 things that I will cover during today's presentation. Very ambitious, but again, let's try. So, I'm glad that we did the word cloud before we started this, because if you ask what is climate finance to 100 people, you'll probably get 100 different answers. That just shows that the diversity of issues that's entailed in this topic. And it's not easy to grasp really what it is. And there are really many controversial topics when you talk about climate finance, if you unpack it, if you like. So there are, you may be aware of a lot of these different controversial topics that's, negotiated oftentimes by parties and contributed to by external stakeholders that we engage in the UN sphere. UNFCCC in a way is that it's the UN, right? It's the UN, meaning everybody can come together. It's a party-driven process. It's a intergovernmental process in the core, but climate finance entails so many other stakeholders that come together and discuss all of these issues together. So it's sources, types, channels, governments, etc. These substantive issues cut across all of the work stream that's currently ongoing under the FCCC negotiation on climate finance. And when we talk about climate finance, I think we should go back to where it all started. We all know that Paris Agreement was agreed in 2015, but convention goes way before that. It's 1992, the Rio Conventions. When the convention was established, we talk about these reporting goals, channels, institutions, and sources, etc. These topics are not new. In other words, these topics are as old as where it all started from Rio. I'm saying this because when we talk about climate finance, we tend to, or it's easy to think it as a standalone topic. It really is not. I see it as more of an evolution, if you like, not only from the time perspective from Rio to Paris to until now, but also, conceptually speaking, it all begins with science, because climate change issue evolved from science, scientists warning that something needs to be done about it, and it requires action by all parties. So based on that scientific finding, okay, then based on the science, if we know what's coming up, then action comes into place. And in order to implement those actions, then we need means of implementation, namely the finance. So that's the conceptual link, if you like. If you look at the slide, so what you're reading on the screen on the left is the findings of IPCC in 1990. Now, the findings of IPCC is still very relevant to us in the 6th assessment report and now going into 7th, right? And back then already was very clear that the natural GHG impact is already harming climate change, harming the atmosphere and therefore causing climate change. And on the right, what you see is the objective of the convention written back then. And now, when parties agreed to Paris Agreement in 2015, again, the same conceptual framework applies. So IPCC made it clear that it's a human influence on the climate system. And based on that scientific findings, the parties in the Paris Agreement agreed to the objective of the Paris Agreement, which you see on the screen, well below 2 degrees Celsius with a view to holding it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And based on these science and action cycle, then what comes into place is finance. And there is no universally agreed definition of climate finance, but the standing committee within the ICCC came up with a operational definition of climate finance, which you see on the screen. And once you have an idea of what's needed to implement the actions needed, what parties agreed is that, okay, then we will establish a mechanism for parties, especially developing country parties, to implement those actions needed in order to address the impacts that we know from science, right? And the mechanism can be described as a mechanism rolls on itself, meaning it is a system, if you like, or apparatus, if you like, in order to implement and achieve the objectives of the convention and the Paris Agreement. So the financial mechanism is defined under the convention and the Paris Agreement. And as you know, GCF and the GEF are the operating entities of the financial mechanism. But GCF and the GEF do not constitute the financial mechanism as such, because if you read Article 11 of the convention, the last bullet, you will see that the financial mechanism is defined, but developed country parties may provide through bilateral, regional, and multilateral channels. So it really entails a whole broader set of channels, if you like, of climate finance delivered to developing countries, but signified, if I personally use that word, signified by the two operating entities, namely the GCF and the GEF. So evolution of climate finance really contains or entails a lot of sub elements as well. So from Rio to Paris, there are a whole set of elements that also evolves along the time, namely the obligation of who will take the lead, and who is the recipient of climate finance, which still to date is an ongoing discussions. And the goal, how much is going to be mobilized for climate finance. In Rio, that is not really clearly stipulated, but in Paris, we already had the $100 billion goal back then. And it was in Paris that parties agreed that they will set a new collective quantifiable goal by 2025. Even the instrument, third bullet you see on the screen, in the convention days, it was mainly grant or concessional basis. But in Paris, we have a whole wider, if you like, set of instruments that's stipulated in there. So one could say that the discussions on these issues are evolving over time. Although grant and concessional basis of finance is really still at the core of the discussions. I mean, it really depends on who you ask. From developed countries and developing countries, perspectives are quite different. Lastly, if you read the convention language and what the financial resources are for, you will see that during the convention, it was preparation of national communication and other reporting obligations that developing countries, with the introduction of operationalization of the convention, they were obliged to regularly report on what they're doing. And this entailed financial cost, and that cost was to be covered by developed countries. And mitigation and adaptation support is included in there. But in Paris, as you may well know, it's a whole set of other actions that's required funding. So we're really talking about a wider set of actions that's required in order to fully implement the Paris Agreement and meet its objectives. And these are important because these are the discussions that you will witness during the COP discussions. If you read the COP agenda, these are spread across the different agenda items, and finance is key usually in order to solve the deadlock in these discussions. Moving on to the diagram that I spoke about. So this is what this is obviously not officially or formally recognized, but this is what I like to put to describe about climate finance under UNFCCC, because it's really easy. Once you come across any topic, then this serves as a useful framework to understand the topic. The first, the circle on the top is what we call mobilization of climate finance. And the left side is the oversight or the tracking of support, if you like. It's the monitoring, reporting, and verification of climate finance. And on the right side is the delivery. So we always talk about mobilizing more money, making the pie bigger so that developing countries and stakeholders have bigger amount of money to implement climate action. You know, it's easily signified as the $100 billion goal by 2020 and the ongoing discussion on the NCQG, the new goal, right? So that's related to the ambition of parties on how much resources will be mobilized over and all from both public and private sources. On the left side, the oversight meaning, okay, then if parties decided to do that, then there must be some sort of oversight mechanism to track how much is being achieved and how much are needed in order to finally reach the goal. So that boils down to a lot of different work streams that's ongoing under UNFCCC. But from the finance perspective, what's important to note is that the Standing Committee on Finance is releasing technical reports on where those finance is at the moment. Now, this is one difference is from other reporting mechanisms outside of the UNFCCC. For example, in the CPI, many of you might know, there is this very famous spaghetti diagram and the landscape of climate finance. So an overview of where the current flow is. CPI and other climate finance trackers are very important stakeholders that the SCF has. But I guess within the FCCC sphere, what's important to note is the UN, meaning developed and developing countries, they have equal say in terms of how to frame the flow, what source of information that they will use to prepare the report, and what kind of recommendation will be published at the end of the day. This is different from independent research institutions and NGOs or reports, because it all boils down to governance and the framing of the reporting at the end of the day, what needs to be published. And the last but not least is the the circle on the right side, which is the delivery mechanisms. There are dedicated climate finance funds established under the UNFCCC, and we hope to have another addition to this fund in Dubai, the famous loss and damage fund. Now that's being discussed by parties throughout this year. So this relates to once the resources are mobilized, then that gets dispersed to developing countries through various channels, including public and private sector channels. But under the FCCC, there are dedicated funds that provide grant-based financing. Again, these different funds, namely the GCF, GEF, the Adaptation Fund, and the Least Developed Countries Fund, the LDCF, and the Special Climate Change Fund, SCCF. These two funds are administered by the GEF, and they all have different roles, and they have different governance structure, and the parties use these different funds for different purposes. And they have, they serve as an important role in implementing the projects on the ground. There are other funds outside of the FCCC, namely the Climate Investment Fund, but really these FCCC funds are at the heart of developing country parties because of the ownership, because these funds are established by developing countries. And the COP has the governing authority over these funds. Hence, the programming directions or the policies are governed by parties themselves. So this is why it's very important for a lot of parties if you ask them. Moving on to the NCQG. So I guess drilling a little bit more into the mobilization side of the Trinity. This is now at the heart of discussions, and what we foresee, especially next year, because next year is the last year of the discussions before parties agree to the new goal. Ever since parties agreed to have the new goal in Paris in 2015, a process was launched. It's a 3-year process on setting the new goal. So unlike I think I've seen the Copenhagen in the word cloud before we started to have this discussion. $100 billion goal by 2020. $100 billion. A lot of people say in my corridor discussion, it's a very, what's the word? It's very artificial, because 100 billion is a political commitment. 100 billion is an ambition put forward. But if you start asking, where did the $100 billion come? Then you will keep reading Copenhagen, because, it was not based on any specific technical reports, so to say, or assessment of what's needed on the ground, or the scale of resources that's going into different climate projects. It's none of those. That's why it's called, as many people say, it's the artificial goal. But now, ever since parties agreed to have this NCQG, people started saying, maybe we should do it differently. Maybe we should really look into in setting this goal. Not only is it politically very difficult to set this, but people start to say, let's try to study this and do it right, and so that it has impact. So it is based on something, based on the scale. If there is a scale that the whole globe needs to reach by certain time period, then it should really count based on real world evidence and data. And that's what the NCQG process is about over the 3-year period. We are now facing at the second year, and the 3rd year will finish next year. And the governance is that the presidency of the COP assigns 2 people, one from developed, one's from developing, and they lead these technical work. So they report every year to the COP on what they have found out technically through the various processes, and the report is considered by the COP and the CMA, and what you read at the decision language contains the guidance from parties on how they wish to take forward this process in order to culminate next year. So what you see is a brief process of this 3-year program, but I'm not gonna elaborate on that given the time limit. But I'm sure Gennaro and Mary Jane will circulate the slides afterwards, so you can take a look at this later on. And this is the work plan of this year. Again, I'm not going to elaborate. You're welcome to look at it. The NCQJ report will be published at the end of this year, so you can have a look at that. The final TED 8. TED stands for Technical Expert Dialogue. There are a whole lot of acronyms that you will need to familiarize yourself if you really want to understand the FCCC climate finance. But the final report, final workshop, if you like, the final TED will be held prior to Dubai. It's going to be webcast. So if you want to follow, you're most welcome to do so as Yanglo constituency. So let's talk about Standing Committee on Finance really quickly. As I said, it's a committee that supports the COP on these 4 core functions. I think strategically speaking, you could say that these are the 4 areas that the committee supports the COP and make recommendations on, so that this committee was established in 2012, but before then, all the discussions were held within the subsidiary bodies discussions. So that means the parties came together 2 weeks every year in June session and 1 more week at the end of the year before the COP. And that's where all of the decision came into place. But as the climate finance issue became more and more technically complex, and there needs to be more work done, driven by parties, I think that's important, driven by parties. They established this committee to meet at least twice a year, normally 3 times a year, to really have produce in-depth materials so that parties do not need to rush in a way within the limited time of conference to reach the conclusions. So these are the 6 activities, if you like, that the SCF is mandated in its original decisions to establish the SCF. Obviously, the SCF deals with a whole lot of other activities that I am showing to you on this slide right here. So these are the key outputs that the SCF is delivering to parties in the past few years and also in the years to come. And who knows, there may be additional mandates coming out of Dubai. But the last, how many is it? 6 bolded fonts is the outputs that the SCF will put forward to the COP in Dubai, and these will inform the deliberation of parties in the various agenda items at the COP. This leads to naturally links to the final topic that I'll talk about, which is climate finance agenda items at the COP that you will see on the screen. So if you can imagine, these are the agenda items that the parties will engage on in Dubai and produce decisions that will act as signals to the world on what the government's intergovernmental process on these different issues will be. So if you translate these agenda items into number of decisions they need to agree on, it's close to 20 decisions. I personally think that I have a family of 4 with 2 children, and whenever we try to make a decision where to eat outside, it takes hours, if not failure in that negotiation and what we're going to eat on. So if you can imagine, 197 parties coming into the conference and deciding on a common voice on these different issues to send the right signal to the world on where the world should head to in terms of climate finance. So it's really a tall order that we are talking about here, and that's the role of the UNFCCC Secretariat to facilitate the discussion and to support the presidency of each year to ensure that we arrive at the right signal and successfully towards the end of the COP. The SCF reports work as well, I'm looking for the right word, the right basis to have these important discussions upon, because again, like I said, these discussions really need real evidences that's collected from the ground. Parties should have latest information on climate finance based on what's heard from the practitioners and data collectors on the ground. That's neutral from the UN stamp in a way, not by independent mind, not by an independent organization or foundation that's governed by someone. So it's all about the process, the right process, the neutral process, and inclusivity and transparency. That's what the UN is about, and that's why again I emphasize the voice of youth. We hope to see more engaged in the SCF, not only under the SCF but across all of the agenda items in the process that's launched, so that the voice of the youth is captured and forwarded to the COP, and parties can hear your views. I know that I'm running over time now almost, and I have 5 more minutes. So let me just quickly run through what's coming up in Dubai. So, if you look at this table, one can be very lost. And if you look at the FCCC website and the annotation document, you'll be even lost more because these will be spread across 5 different documents under COP, CMA, CMP, SBI, SUBSTA, and I put together into this one slide so that it makes a little more sense to you. So we spoke about mobilization of finance, right? So under mobilization, as like I said, we're talking about generating the bigger pie of resources. So agenda item on long-term finance, the NCQG, and in a way, the Article 9.5 discussions belongs to mobilization. So simply put, Article 9.5 talks about the reports that developed countries submit every 2 years on how they intend to generate climate finance. So these belong to mobilization cluster. Standing Committee on Finance cuts across different clusters, so I left it as is. There is a review cluster that you will see this year in Dubai, namely 7th review of the financial mechanism. The COP reviews financial mechanism every 4 years, and that's really to assess the effectiveness and efficiency of climate finance flowing to developing countries, and that's overdue actually, but we can speak about that more during the Q&A if anybody wants to know more. The SCF is being reviewed. That's also a periodic review on how the SCF is functioning. Is it functioning well, or is it can be improved in serving the COP? So that's on the agenda this time in Dubai. The GCF, GEF, and AF, as always, is an annual agenda item. So the COP and the CMP and CMA, they will consider the annual report of these funds. They report annually to parties on how they have implemented guidance received from parties, and parties will give guidance on the strategic directions these funds should go. And the last bullet is at the top of the headlines these days. It's the loss and damage finance. There is a process to establish the new loss and damage fund in Dubai, and how that will fit into the mosaic mosaic is the word, on funding arrangements on loss and damage, meaning there is already existing mechanisms that aims to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage, and how the new fund will fit, and what's the governance is going to be like, and what's the ambition of the mobilization, etc. So that's on the agenda of Dubai. I think maybe I can save the, well, I think the next few slides speak to the details of the details of each agenda item. I think I have spoken just briefly just now, so maybe I'll skip these slides again. You can look at these slides once sent to you. And this is the final slide, really. This is the final slide that I hope I included and hope will be useful to everyone, is how the three trinity, or how the mobilization, delivery, and oversight will unfold, has been unfolding, and will unfold in the next few years. You will see that if you look at this slide, you will see why we call FCCC climate finance is really a process. The real work on climate finance is done on the ground. However, I'll finish with this. UNFCCC is seen by many as sometimes time-consuming, slow, and inadequate to address climate emergency that we are facing. And they have some valid points for sure. But as we all know, climate emergency requires a collective effort by everyone, and everyone meaning there needs to be a venue, or there needs to be a platform where everybody comes together, and that's the UN, and that's the UNFCCC. And I think the importance is there, because climate finance under the UNFCCC, we are not implementing the projects. We are not putting, UN doesn't have money. We are the recipient of money. But what is important is that it serves as a platform to gather people together to find a solution, but also it serves as a signal to the world. So depending on the discussions and the progress that can be showcased and implemented through the UNFCCC, that really serves as a signal to the wider investors out there in order to implement the policy framework, to implement the higher ambition and action and support. I think that's where the important really lies. And someone really has to do the job right in order to set the right signal. And that's that at least from the Secretariat's point of view, that's our goal to ensure this discussion goes in the right direction. Obviously, we're in the hands of parties, but we support parties to the best of abilities that we can in order to reach the right scale of finance and expedited delivery and access by those who really need it most from at the underground level. So good luck to all of us. I guess we can say that, and I would like to conclude my presentation at this point. I hope this was a useful intro. Again, by no means enough time to dive into every single details of things, but hoping to use the Q&A session to converse with you in detail as we need. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Back to you.
Thank you so much.
Back to you, Mary Jane.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kim. We are very grateful for delivering this detailed topics in just 40 minutes. You needed a lot of time to take us through, but you've done justice to the time. We are very much grateful. And like you mentioned, all these issues are going to help us, the young people, in knowing the areas of intervention and reporting as far as climate finance within the UNFCCC is concerned. So considering the time spent, I will just allow my colleague, if there is anyone that wants to seek clarity, they can put up their hands now. If not, we'll quickly go into the chat box to see what the questions and concerns are. So I want to give just 3 minutes. Do we have anybody that wants to speak live? I mean, any questions, clarity now? Or we move to the
Yes.
chat box. Okay.
Irene.
You can put up your hand. Okay, Irene.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Noah, for such an insightful and in-depth presentation you have made. I'm based in Nigeria and it's within the African continent. And when you were, the different slides you were showing, there was this bit, that showed the different kinds of funding options that we have. It also showed the climate finance fund. Truth is, within Africa, for one, we have less than 3% of this financing coming into climate finance fund coming into, Africa. One of the major challenges we see is, we need to have like we need to have accredited organizations or say subnational governments to access these funds. And so what we then find, despite the fact that we are heavily impacted by the impact of climate change, is we don't have so much of this financing coming into the African continent. So the question becomes, how can we better position ourselves? Because truth is, when we talk about mitigation and adaptation, we should focus more on accessing financing for for adaptation within the African continent. So sometimes while we're talking about, we need a lot of funding, how can we better position ourselves as countries within Africa to access this financing? Thank you.
I think we can maybe have more questions. So Noah could answer them all at the same time since we have limited time. I also saw Olivia had a question in the chat if you want to come forward, and anyone else as well, please. So Olivia, then Bruna, or Bruna, then Olivia.
Would you like to go first, Bruno?
You can go ahead.
Let me just open my chat. I don't think I can ask the question better than I typed it. Let's see, what did I write? I wrote quite a few things down here. I wanted to know which measurement systems you think are really useful for, I guess, especially sub-Saharan Africa. I've recognized that the SDGs and the IFC performance standards aren't applicable or haven't been applied successfully in emerging markets. And I'm going to keep coming back to sub-Saharan Africa because that's where I live, specifically in Cape Town. So that was one question I had. And then the second question, which kind of leads into that, is how, given that context, and it's a normative question, but how should finance be deployed most effectively? What are these points of intervention? How do we leverage the most impact with the least amount of finance? Because most of the countries, I think I said this in session 1, so many African countries are on exclusion lists because they're still mining. I mean, we produce less than 4%, I think it's 3.2% of the world's carbon emissions, and people don't want to invest money here because we still mine. And I live in a country, as I said earlier about load shedding, where our baseload electricity, some provinces in my country only get less than 8 hours of electricity per day. Sometimes the electricity goes off for 2 to 3 days at a time. So those are my questions.
All right, Bruna, and then Rumi.
Hi, Noah. Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you can hear me well. One thing that worries me when it comes to climate finance is that I see that there are a lot of discussions going on about the importance of mobilizing more resources, and I completely understand because we need more money to move on. But one thing that worries me is the fact that I see kind of a lack of debate on how this money is going to be spent. And most importantly, how we're going to ensure that the nations that are going to be the most affected by climate change, and most of them, they're based in the global south, the decisions are going to be heard in this process and how this money is going to be spent. So this is my question. So okay, we have a huge discussion about how we're going to mobilize resources, but how are the discussions going in terms of how this money is going to be spent? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Romy, you go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much, Noah, for your presentation. I think it was very insightful. I have a question regarding the 100 billion goal because the global north countries, the Annex 2 countries, say that they will reach the 100 billion today, this year, but we will have the reporting of the OECD next year. And I was wondering how the OECD is actually count the 100 billion without the proper climate finance definition, and why it takes so long until the numbers are out.
All right, amazing. These are a lot of questions. I know Sabrina also has his hands. I hope, Noah, you can answer them all at the same time. I know you can. You can try. Yeah, Sabrina, why not? I hope you're taking. Okay, Sabrina put her hand down.
Can I?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick question. Thank you, Noah, for your presentation. And do you think that every country should focus on their climate vulnerabilities in implementing projects? This way, since we only have few financial resources, this way we won't always be talking about what should every country implement. Thank you.
I think we really need to answer now.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those are interesting questions. I think maybe I can group them a little bit, and I think I might have some follow-up maybe questions just to clarify if I need it. So if I understand correctly, Irene was asking how African countries can better position themselves to access finance. So I think that's quite, in a way, similar to what Olivia was asking on how should finance be deployed more effectively, given the needs of African countries. Maybe I can take that first. Yes, obviously we continue to hear the stories of the local communities and countries that really need the finance, right? That's what you asked the question that Irene and Olivia asked is really the questions that's being asked within the negotiating room as well, really. I've been to the contact groups and all these different negotiating meetings within the under the FCCC, and this is the honest to God question that's being asked, because effective deployment of climate finance really entails a whole lot of elements that's behind it. For example, what does it really mean to effectively deliver finance? Does it mean that it has to be there faster? Does that mean that access has to be equally by women and youth and indigenous? Does the effective means that there are the right policy frameworks that within the national government in order for these smallholders and those most vulnerable situations to be able to actually spend the money, to access the money? Does that mean that kind of coordination mechanism is needed? Even the issue of effective deployment, like, does that mean that once, let's say a local community finally got into their hand some international climate finance resource, and they spent it, then effective use, how do we track that? How do we measure the effectiveness, etc.? So this issue of how making sure that the finance, or how the finance should be deployed in the most effective manner, it's really a question that's really dissected in the whole different ways within the FCCC, because Irene and Olivia are right. These are the crucial questions that need answer in order to actually mitigate and adapt against climate change. And what I can say at this point is that there was I'm just sharing this also as an information sharing with all of you as a further reading and a studying to do in order to get to the answers to these questions. There was a long-term finance workshop report over the course of 2 years. I believe it was 2019 to 20 or 18 to 19. Now my memory is failing me. Where parties really delved into the issue of effectiveness of climate finance on delivery of climate finance and what that means and how we get there. And if you ask different people, you'll get different answers. Like I said, I'm very sorry to be very UN here, not giving Olivia and Irene straight answers to be because there is no straight answer. I guess there's from the UN perspective, there are really if you effectiveness has been always been it's not clear cut as cutting paper, but developed countries always stress that resource scale is as important as effectiveness, because with a smaller amount of resource, you can make it really effective as well. But from the other side of the aisle, always stress that, yes, that's true, but then we need more financial resources in order to make paradigm shift and the systemic impacts, right? So the effectiveness conversation in that sense, I am sharing with you that is interpreted in that also can be interpreted into that context. So let me just quickly move on to what Romy and Sabine asked about. On the 100 billion, OECD, before the number is out, how do we make the judgment? Well, we'll see what happens in Dubai.
Sure.
No, because what Romy was mentioning, just for the context of the others, 100 billion is being counted by a whole lot of other actors, including under the SDF and the FCCC as well. The number of counting has always been a few years late, but then 2020, not because anybody is lazy or anything, because that's the nature of reporting by national governments. At the end of the year, governments collect data and information and report, make an official report on how much is spent or provided and supported. So that really means that there is a few years of delay in tracking the information on the 100 billion. And now, like Romy mentioned, the OECD is also a very important intergovernmental agency that publishes the information on where the finance is, where the progress is. But I have to mention that under the UNFCCC, OECD is an important contributor to the report, to the tracking work under the FCCC. Meaning, you have to look at you have to look at what countries make up of OECD members, because not all parties under the FCCC are members of the OECD. And I think it's all about also the accounting system and how to read the numbers. Depending on how to interpret the numbers, then you have different picture. And that's why OECD is a very important source of information, but it's one of the information under the UNFCCC as well. And I guess it boils down to the flagship report under the UNFCCC is the SCF's the biennial assessment and overview of climate finance flows. That goes into the depth of not only how much is identified in terms of the numbers that we have gathered, but an assessment of where the access is, where the different channels are working on, etc. So those are the two nuances that you may wish to take into account in assessing the 100 billion figure. The SCF is going to publish the next round of biennial assessment next year, which I think it will be a very important milestones also in finalizing the assessment of where the $100 billion goal is, because last year, if you look at the Sharm el-Sheikh decision or what they have agreed, they agreed to ask the SDF to publish biennial reports on where the $100 billion goal is. So I think that will be a crucial momentum, if you like, on where parties judge where the $100 billion goal has been met or not, and etc. So that's what I can say about that question. Lastly, is it Sabine? Sorry, Sabrine, sorry. On the vulnerability, I honestly could not understand the question very clearly, but I can say a few words about vulnerability of countries and in order for the most vulnerable countries to utilize the funding. Right now, if you look at the discussions going on under the GCF and the GEF, the eligibility of countries in order to access those funding is for developing countries. So that's the basis, right? But right now there's this discussions on who should be prioritized for vulnerable countries to access finance. It's a very difficult question within the developing country constituency because who is more vulnerable than others? There has been no definition on that. Now there's some movements in to do that, but currently there's no definition of that. Chile, for example, where Genaro is from, can justify, based on the climate vulnerability and impact, Chile is very vulnerable. And so are the LDC and CITES. These two groups of countries are mentioned across the Paris Agreement. And what about African states? African states are also very vulnerable. So I think this is a very emerging topic, if you like, on how to prioritize or how to who will get the money first and more money, and also heavily contested as well within the GCF board and the GEF Council discussions. So maybe that's what I can respond to Sabrine at this point, and encourage you to continue to follow the governance mechanisms of the different funds. You will surely able to follow more of this regard. Again, sorry if I didn't answer those questions to the most direct way possible, but I hope these can serve as a lead to find the answers. Back to you,
Thank you so much.
Genaro and
No,
Mary Jane.
thank you so much, Noah, for your insights. They were amazing. I want to know if you have 2 minutes for a follow-up question on this. So I'll go first and then Romy, so we can both have a chance. So I wanted to have a little bit more insight on the progress made on the dialogues on the Article 21.c, the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogues that were established last year at COP, and also, what is the relationship between Article 9 in accordance? Because I saw this is what the framing of the discussion was all about in Bangkok this year. Go ahead, Romy.
Thank you. Sorry for taking the spot again, but I'm also very curious about the non-UNFCCC finance agenda. So right now we're having these huge developments in the reform of the international financial architecture. And I think it's very related also in regards to discussions under 2.1c and also the NCQG. And I was wondering how the Secretariat responds to the non-UNFCCC climate finance agenda and if there are any plans to bring them more together.
Wow, good question.
Thank
Go
you
ahead.
so much. Should I answer, Genaro?
Yes, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. Sorry, just let me quickly get back to Romy. Can you just repeat the question just one more time?
Sorry, it's a bit noisy. I hope you can understand me. So I was wondering about the non-UNFCCC finance agenda because we have a lot of momentum regarding the reform of the international financial architecture and the IMF and the World Bank, the MDBs. And I was wondering how the UNFCCC can better connect with the non-UNFCCC climate financial agenda to bring the reform of the international financial institutions better together with the UNFCCC climate finance negotiations, because I think they are very interrelated. especially in regard to Article 2.1c and the new collective quantified goal. And yeah, that's a really big issue right now in my work. So I'm really interested. What is your opinion on this regard?
May I ask what you said in your work? May I ask what work you're currently doing?
Beside other things, I'm working on the reform of the international financial architecture and the Paris roadmap from the June event in Paris.
Yeah,
And,
Romy,
you're currently associated with an institution?
So I'm the co-contact point of this working group together with Jen, but I'm working on the IFA reforms together with German Watch, which is a German NGO.
Yes, understand. Yeah. Yes, German Watch always have the sharpest question that gives a lot of people many headache, which really appreciate, by the way. Thank you so much for that. They're two very good questions. First question goes to maybe the first answer goes to the Gennaro. Yes, Article 2.1c and Article 9. These are the two articles that you must have heard repeatedly during the Bangkok meeting. Maybe just take a step back for everyone to have an equal understanding. Article 9 of the Paris Agreement is the finance article of the Paris Agreement. It really signifies the obligation and the principles of how financial resources should be provided, or let's say how financial resources should be mobilized and accessed under the Paris Agreement. So it really is at the heart of the Paris Agreement in finance. Article 2 is about objectives of Paris Agreement. And within the Article 2, there are 3 sub-articles: Article 2.1c, Article 2.1a to C. And Article 2.1c speaks about I'm reading it here. This agreement will be implemented to reflect equity and making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. And it's interesting because Article 2.1a is about holding the temperature increase. Article 2.1b is about adaptation, and Article 2.1c is about making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. So I think it speaks to the fact that, well, there's no annotation to Paris Agreement, so everybody has a different interpretation on this. But many people say that the 2.1c is about finance in order to implement A and B. So, I think because of this kind of different interpretation of what this means, or lack of definition thereof, parties have been discussing how this should be implemented. For example, if you ask one party, they will say that, well, making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low GHG and climate resilient development will entail transforming the financial system over and all. So that means, linked to a lot of, I think I've seen TNFD and TCFD, the disclosure movement when we did the work cloud in the beginning. So that really speaks to, transforming the overall paradigm of making all finance climate finance. So it's just very simply put. But others might say, well, if you try to frame the discussions towards that way, then that very much sounds like, deviation of obligation of provision of grant-based public finance to developing countries, because our Paris Agreement, Article 9, very clearly states that the developed countries shall provide financial resources to assist developing countries in continuation of the existing obligation under the convention. That's the wording of the Paris Agreement. So so there are two different sets of finance related articles within the Paris Agreement, and that's where the whole debate is. What does 21C mean? How do we operationalize that? What do different people think about? How do we make in the finance consistent with that kind of development pathway? And how do we, what's the word? Synchronize that or marry that with Article 9. So that is really a technically very interesting topic to look at on how to make the finance flow more consistent with the development pathway, but also at the same time, how do we combine that with the ongoing effort from developed countries side to take the leadership in providing the financial resources, and then how do we make that as a systemic effort in order to reach the common goal of addressing climate emergency. And also at the political level, it's very, very sensitive, as you can imagine, because that boils down to who takes the lead, who pays, and who receives. So that's the whole, I guess, in a nutshell, relationship between 21C and Article 9. I hope that answers in a way to Genaro's question. And continuing back to Romi's question on the IFI, International Financial Institution reform, and the MDB reform. You're very right that the discussion is currently ongoing in order to making sure that MDBs are at the center place in providing resources to climate, to ensuring all finance from MDBs are climate finance. Also can be interpreted from the 21C perspective, as Romi said. But I think it's very important to have the MDBs to get their heads around how to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. From the FCCC side, I guess Romi said non-climate finance, non-UNFCCC agenda, because it's not governed by the FCCC, and she is right. MDBs themselves have different governing mechanisms. In other words, the COP, the FCCC under parties, the COP does not have a say to telling IFIs or the MDBs to do what. But it's interesting also at the same time, parties themselves, governments govern the MDBs. The word sounds a bit strange, but it's true. ADB is run by its board of governing members, which is from governments, and same goes to the World Bank, EBRD, etc. So what the COP is doing is that if you see the Sharm el-Sheikh decision, the cover decision, namely the 1CP27, there is the COP decided to invite and encourage the IFIs and MDBs to calling them for this reform. So that there's a strong signal, at least from the FCCC, which is a centerpiece of resolving the global climate emergency. And there is this recognition of this importance of reforming the MDBs, and because they have the scale of resources and the competence towards mobilizing private sector engagement, which is really very important piece of resolving the climate finance. So what I could answer to Romi is that what I can highlight is that the governance system is different, but at least this importance is encapsulated by the COP decisions in the COP, and how this information will be technically handled at the technical level, namely the work stream of 21C. There's one more additional a dialogue that will happen in Geneva in September, and NCQG, the Technical Expert Dialogue. I'm sure, Romi, you must have been following it throughout the year, and also at the final TED 8 that will be held in Dubai. This is really an unfolding topic on the role of the MDBs and IFIs in the futures to come in the new goal, and then what their role is in order to scale up. This is a really evolving topic that I encourage you to continue to follow as we prepare the report to the COP in this regard. Sorry for taking the time too long. Again, I would like to really thank Gennaro, Mary Jane, and the whole Young constituency for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. And I turn over the floor back to Gennaro and Mary Jane. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you
Noah.
so much, Ken. Yeah, for the great section. I think this section has been very, very great. We've gotten some clarity on the UNFCCC process. And even though Kim nearly responded like the UN, it's also gave us some insights into what the system is all about. So we thank you so much. I think we may want to have more engagement in moving forward. I mean, those of us who will be at the COP can still be engaging Kim there, and we would also put up his email. Should you have any follow-up questions or clarity or concerns, I think Kim will be available to provide that in the emails. So I will say thank you so much, Kim. But before then, if Jen, you have something to also say or add to it, that would be great before we let go Kim for other engagement he has.
Not much to say. Thank you again for your engagement in our space, and thank you for your insights. Thank to the Secretariat team as well, as always supporting us along the way since we met from BOM at the SB 58. You have been very, very supportful of our capacity building, our questions, and our engagement. And I'm very looking forward to seeing you along with the team at the Geneva meetings, the SCF meetings, and the technical expert dialogues, and the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogues as well. And of course, at COP. And I hope all of our members also get a chance to go and engage. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, and looking forward to seeing many of you. And if you have any other burning questions, the organizers have my contact details. You can always send me an email, and we can, if I don't even answer, and we'll find someone within the Secretariat who does. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noah.
Okay. Colleagues, I think at this juncture, I would like to just take about 5 minutes break for those of you who want to stretch and take some tea or water. We'll come back to take the next presentation from our next speaker, who is already also on the call, as you can see. So please, let's just have some 5 minutes break and come back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be your next speaker.
Just to mention, we can as well make use of the backdrops that we shared, which says right above me here, even though I'm not the fellow, but an organizer, but just a way of sort of showing you what is necessary, right? So it's been shared on the group, and I've actually been sharing during the course of the session to each of us individually. Please make use of it. We have our graduation coming up very soon, right after Jen's session, yes. Yes, we have our graduation. We'll also show you how to make use of your graduation hats. Yes. So thank you all.
All right, friends. See you in a couple minutes. Go and grab some water, hug your mom, your dog, your cat, whatever, and see you later.
Hello. Yeah, great. So that was a great first section we had there from the UNFCCC Secretariat. So we are moving forward into our next presentation. And this is going to be taken by our very own. I think you've already seen him. He's in the person of Genaro Matthias Godi Gonzalez. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce the name well. So Jen is one of the contact points for this working group. That's the Young Finance and Markets Working Group. And he advocates at the edge of the climate finance negotiations, and thus coordinates this working group with Romy, the processes of building common positions and articulates with the broad climate space. And Genaro is a champion of the Global Youth Coalition, leading capacity building and empowerment projects for more than, I think, 5,000 youth worldwide. Wow. Romy is doing a lot. So Romy is going to be looking at the pointers he's going to be sharing with us. Come again?
I think Romy would not be able to join this.
I mean, yes, Jen. Yeah, that's Jen. I mean, Jen. You will be looking at the overview of the Global Youth Coalition and the youth advocacy across the globe. And if you have some time, what's happening in Chile, how you've been doing it there. And then the intervention so far, the working group has been involved in as far as the various climate finance and climate finance related topics are concerned. So I think you'll be touching more of some interventions we've done concerning the MDB's reforms and already the NCQG and loss and damage finance. What has the working group been doing so far with your leadership and that of Romy as well? So the floor is now open for you, Jen, to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Jane. A few clarifications maybe to not overhype the expectations of this session for me. But yeah, I will not focus on the Global Youth Coalition. That's an organization I'm part of, but I'm going to be focused on youth engagement and in UNF process, and also our engagement in the private sector, which is coming ever more relevant. With all these new standards that are coming out and things that are opening up in our youth opportunities and the spaces we conquer, and kind of like to ensure intergenerational equity is at the edge of every discussion and every decision making. So let me share my screen a little bit. Feel free to jump with any questions in the chat. I hope we have some time left. We're running really out of time here, so I'll have to go fast. And also feel free to then ask me follow-up questions in the chat, in the WhatsApp chat, and I'll be always here to support you if you want to engage further in the youth space. So thank you very much for the presentation, Mary Jane, and I guess I'll just start. All right. Can you see it change? No. All right. Okay, cool. All right. So much has been said about the science by our fellow speaker. The science is pretty clear that the time is running out, and our chances to narrowing the gap to getting to align our pathways towards the window of opportunity to secure a safe, just and resilient development for everyone has signaled the importance of making structural changes. And of course, there are conditions and characteristics of these pathways that we need to look out for in order to make this happen. And there are many different choices that humanity can make, and countries can make regarding what are the different tensions and what stops climate action becoming reality. So there are conditions that need to be enabled for individual and collectives and parties and almost every level of engagement in this society, according government, civil society, and the private sector, in order to make this happen. And there are also conditions that might constrain the advancement of these goals. Climate action should not underestimate, further creating further inequalities in our societies. So poverty, inequity, injustice, all barriers on economic, institutional are things we need to look out for when we are implementing our just transitions in order for humanity to be ready, especially thinking on individuals where they're precarious circumstances, where there lies also a potential to foster a multifaceted approach, that really harmonizes the environmental and social aspects of these challenges. This involves orchestrating financial strategies that not only drive the shift to our circle, sustainable and resilient economy, but also rectify the social and economic disparities, like I mentioned. So there are many challenges and opportunities between non-state actors, local governments, communities, indigenous people, and financing should be at the edge of how we can set means of implementation to foster green employment opportunities, enhance inclusions for marginalized groups. So every part of the social system can be, having a chance to be part of this process. Especially us youth, we are the generations of change makers that will, be at the edge of the decision making in the upcoming decades, and we are also having them now. And so therefore we have the responsibility to make sure that the political decisions are made in using the right angles, and we need to work together to create this enabling environment so all generations can be part of the decision making and the change that needs to be happening at the rate that we need it to be in order to have a habitable world to live. So this is really an invitation for all of actors from the IPCC to work together towards ensuring this future. So I wanted to talk about a little bit on the role of youth in climate finance and sustainable finance as well. You might know already now the differences between the two of the definitions. So climate finance goes a little bit more as of now, as of the past years, what are the provisions of developed countries towards developing countries, so we can all align pathways towards sustainable development and climate resilient development and low carbon emissions. But there's ever more in talks like Noah mentioned on the NCQG, and how does the private sector also has a role on this, and how this new framework could help us and all actors engage into aligning flows into those flows that are consistent to the challenges that we are saying. So sustainable finance is more focused on the private sector, sustainable stocks exchange, as we learned in the past sessions, and they consider indicators and standards regarding social, environmental, and governance, green investment and impact investment, and those indicators and standards define what this is. And now we're seeing even more standardized versions of this. So while we had like 15 years of like everyone doing it by their own and kind of like allowing space for greenwashing as well to happen. And of course, now we're happy to see more standardized processes regarding this. And where the role of youth is also to encourage the private sector and encourage the organizations that we are part of and will be part of in the future, in order to foster its potential to transition and creating that possible impact, while also looking in mind and on delivering financial returns for our communities and people. So this is really relevant, and emphasize that there's a growing demand on sustainable finance solutions that can address pressing environmental and social issues, such as climate change, inequality, poverty, and those solutions are there. We're just society just waiting then to utilize them, and the youth really has its potential to be this decision makers, be part of showing what are the co-benefits to our other colleagues in order that we can make this transition at the rate that we need to. So yeah, I'm very sorry about how we running out of time here, but feel free to watch the recording afterwards. So some relevant engagements for the private sector within the UN system are listed here. Not all of them, of course, and we have seen some of them during our sessions. One of the things that wasn't mentioned much was the Global Compact, which is the largest corporate sustainability initiatives that calls to companies to align their strategies and operation with the universal principles on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, and take really action on these goals. So it's a very good, I'm going to go on the next slide on this, but there's also another organization, agency of the UN, body of the UN, which is the UN Environmental Program, and it has its arm, which is the UNFFI, the financial initiative that really convene the networks of banks, investors, and insurers in order to accelerate sustainable development, catalyzing those actions across the whole financial system to support the transition to a more sustainable economy. This also includes the other arms of institutions, which are the Principle for Responsible Investments, the Global Investor Coalition on Climate Change, and Green Bond Principles, which are very important arms in standardizing the process alongside alongside the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures and natural disclosures that then give those inputs to have a real green and sustainable form of investments taking place that are standardized. And then we have the SSE that we also heard about on the last sessions. They're not on the slide though, but is this global platform that really exchanges collaboration with investors, companies, and regulator, policymakers, etc., in order to set up what sustainable stock exchanges would look like in order to achieve, the program of conducting evidence-based policy analysis and network of multi-stakeholders and consensus building in order to give advice and technical assistance and services for the markets to really have sustainable stocks, essentially. So I'll just go again. Should be a little video here. Oh my god, I think I did not put the sound. Well, I'll show you the presentation later. This is only 1 minute, but there's the UN Compact has an academy, which essentially is this digital learning platform for companies. So I really wanted to show this, and you guys, friends, can after click on this link and watch the videos and things that come up there, because when you are and if you are now in decision making or able to influence your companies, then it will be great to have this, acknowledge, this learning platforms where you can really come and show your the heads of who takes the decisions at those companies that is really a benefit for them to start training and creating capacities in order to align their efforts into sustainable development and climate resilience. Thank you. Now I wanted to go a little bit more on the broad youth engagement in the in the UN processes. I wanted to start from what is the bigger side and then come back to Youngo, which is our space here for the UNFCCC. But there are many different constituencies under the UN system. And this is both good and maybe some trouble sometimes, as I say, having this multiple platforms to have our voice is really good, but we're also, all doing voluntary work. We're all trying to build common positions, and there are many, spaces and people, but we are limited time and limited efforts. So I invite you to choose what constituency and what negotiations or what aspects you would like to cover the most, but as a personal statement, I encourage everyone to try to find synergies within this space, because we cannot be using our time to do double work and there's literally no time to address the climate crisis. So we really need to make sure all these important groups work together alongside. So when you start engaging on these constituencies, you have the opportunity then to connect with other constituencies and make sure that we are sharing resources, that we're sharing the spaces, and we are aligning ourselves with the advocacy the most strategic way possible. So the UNMGCY is the bigger, wider group of the UN and serves for the General Assembly, and works on a whole area of human rights, sustainable development, peace and security, resilience, humanitarian actions, and the UN Assembly on Economic and Social Council, as well as the Security Council and the Secretariat. And it's mostly focused on the SDGs and its completion, and of course that. There's also the Children Youth Major Group for the UNEP. So the UN Environmental Program also has a youth engagement mechanism. So mostly focused on environmental conservation, but of course there's also intersections on other things like finance initiatives, and we're very looking forward to work with that as well. So YOUNGO, the UNFCCC, we are the official constituency recognized by the UNFCCC. All youth together have this space and I'll explain a little bit later what are the structure of this. But the COP and the SBs are our main spaces of engagement. But of course, we also have the Peter Beatsford dialogues, when we have more youth presence in those spaces, really important for decision making at the international level. And of course, we have thematic groups and operational areas. For the new, Biological Diversity Convention, there's another constituency called the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and those represent the voices under that convention and raise awareness on young people on the values of biodiversity, and connects individuals to organizations. We work together with all these constituencies in the past, and we very look forward to doing so in the future. And on the last, you see that there's a Sustainable Finance Youth Coalition. This doesn't exist yet, but it's something that we're trying to build, and I wanted to mention in this academy since it's a topic of your if your interest, because we really want to have a place where all of these constituencies converge, and where we can reduce the double work on creating capacities to engage in the private sector, and really put our hands into the work of the research that must be done to ensure that the intergenerational equity is considered at all levels, including decision making, but also inside the including policy, but also inside decision making at the private sector engagement. So very looking forward for that, and invite you to stay tuned and join our working groups and other constituencies as well, because this is going to be a space for everyone. So now coming back to YOUNGO and what our constituency is doing. We are one of the constituencies under the UNFCCC, and we focus on collaboration, cooperation, and network to facilitate this space for youth to work together and work under the agendas on the UNFCCC, as well as those UN entities that are interested. We are joined for many NGOs, institutions, and networks, and movements, and stakeholders. So it's a very broad space where we all converge and align our positions to reach common positions. We work on policy, lobby, and advocacy, and we are responsible to really bring the voice of youth, so to raise ambitions on climate just policies through our submissions, interventions, opportunities to have conversations with people at every level, and we support and facilitate children and youth participation engagement at the national, local, and international level, especially in those international negotiations under the UNFCCC. I want to have YOUNGO. I learned this recently, actually. YOUNGO, when we speak at the UNFCCC, we have a flag we either have this that says Youngo, it's on the other side, but yeah, other says Youngo, or it says youth NGOs. And this is really important because Youngo means youth organizations. So youth non-governmental organizations. That sometimes we forget about this, but it's really important that the youth organizations are on the edge of also participating in the working groups and our spaces, because that's the best way to make it sustainable in the long term, and that we really make sure that we're aligned working on this, and that we use our platform efficiently in order to, engage in this spaces when we represent the youth. But continuing, we also work on awareness, knowledge, and capacity building. As you might see, that we're doing an academy here, but we also do all sorts of research and on emerging issues, and disseminate information through webinars, workshops, and events, such as the Conference of Youth, which is a conference that we every year we organize just before COP. So some principles on how the organizational structure is. So we have a flat structure. That means that there's no hierarchy in the decision making. We only have like functional roles, but everything is based on consensus. So we have guidelines for decision making, and we make sure that our positions are converged at least in the majority of us, and all voices are heard. And when we make decisions, everyone has an equal voice, and we are one of the oldest and largest constituencies under the UN. So I talk a little bit about working groups, and this, as you can see in your screen, there are different working groups, work streams that we work on, and you can see like there's action for climate empowerment, so climate education, how can we power ourselves, there's gender, mitigation, adaptation, health, oceans, agriculture, human rights, renewable energies, conflict of interest, the technology mechanism, NDCs, us from the finance and markets, loss and damage, and many more. And there's always the room space open to create more working groups if there's a consensus to do so. So there's also operational working groups that serve as more functional spaces for the constituency to work as fluently. And of course, we are far from being perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, and every year we're trying to make our best to make sure that we represent and bring the space so everyone feels represented in the spaces. And every year the people change, and we need to make sure that those learning processes, as we change, also change with we carry them with us and really like bring the torch to the people that are coming. So one of our most biggest policy papers is the global statement. So there's a process. Yes, thank you, Gabrielle. So there's a process of where the ELCOIS, or the National Conference of Youth, takes place in every country, and those statements then goes to the Regional Conference of Youth, which is held in every region. And then afterwards, we have a process, online process, as a hackathon, where we collect all the inputs from all these positions, and then build this global statement that will serve for the process of the COP, but also on all the year to come, to serve as a guiding positions for our submissions and our engagements. So how does the submission process looks like? Where at the SPs or the COPs, the CMA and CMP, work programs are scheduled by the secretariats, either the substa of the SB, so the subsidiary boards on implementation of or scientific technical assessments, and they announce what is the work plan and the timeline and the structure gonna be, and then these processes are open for all observers to put their submissions, their positions on the different negotiations or workshops that are set to gather inputs from parties and non-parties observers. So this is where we come in. We have the space to put our positions. We build common position processes within our working groups, and we use all sorts of innovational techniques to gather inputs as well, and also we're trying to build the synergies with all other youth spaces to get this happening, and really like get inputs from everywhere we can. These are examples of like how we are creating both policy positions and submissions for the processes. So the first one you see our submission for the new collective quantified goal that we did the last month, and it's going to be for the negotiations, the workshops that is going to be held in Geneva that Noah was mentioning about, so you can read it afterwards. I will send the links, and the presentation also has the links attached, so you can look what were the positions that we built, and we're also going to be having dialogues internally at the working group to see how we're going to build this as a more concise ways so we can approach all stakeholders during the workshop that is going to be held at the end of September. We also build the position papers with other working groups and constituencies. One was built for the food system, for the General Environmental Facility Assembly. That was a couple weeks ago. And we also tried to position, build, and do policy from outside the UNFCCC as well, because we want, one of the really big frames for the SB's engagement this year was we want the UNFCCC to break out the UNFCCC silo. So we don't want it to just be this body where they make certain decisions, but really make the changes in the whole system, not just the UN system. So we need to engage also in the decisions that are making with the multi-development banks and the international financial architecture reform. And we need to be part of this. And what a better space than some space that just gathers all youth together. So this is a segment what I like to call, and my friends from Latin America like to call, from protest to proposals. So we also engage in the UN events, and not just bring our statements and our positions and our demands, but also really like be at the edge of the solutions, and also be engaging on bringing those solutions to every part of society. So our communities, our local governments, and we have a really important role in being the mycelium of youth. And I like to say mycelium because it's a really critical part of the ecosystem that connects what is needed with who and what has the solutions or the resources that they need. So we really have this role of like passing the voice and bringing the solutions where they need to be. And I hope you'll also get in touch with this mycelium concept and bring it forward to your communities. These are examples on how have we engaged in other in events. So you can see, like on the bottom here, we have the Children and Youth Pavilion, which was the first time developed last year at COP. And there are also photos of us engaging in different opportunities, both online and in-person events. We also have the opportunities of having bilaterals with institutions and parties. As you can see, we had a meeting with the World Bank last COP. We had a meeting with the various parties, negotiators and ministers. Here we got the Minister of Chile. And also we can have opportunity to make live questions during the events at the CMA and CMP, which is very important that we raise ambition and we really like foster a discussion where there's no greenwashing taking place and no youth washing as well. So not just that, but we also make actions and demonstrations that we can organize in these spaces to also be loud about what we want. And there's like examples of even when we invited like members of parliaments to join the actions that we make, and they actually come, and this is really like nice to see that also like parties are taking place, even if we need to bring it with a grain of salt, because of course there's political processes going place. But as you can see, I'm here as well in an action that was delivered at COP and that was covered by the media. So it's a really important space that we can take to really communicate to the rest of the world. So in terms of our finance and market working group, So we always take meaningful youth inclusion at the edge of what we try to advocate for, and really also bring the needs to scale up and improve access to climate finance for youth and youth-led projects. So we make sure we have the means of implementations and resources to create resilience and bring the contributions to our community level. This is very important, so we don't just are considered as actors that are relevant in decision making, which is really good. That we get this opportunity to bring intergenerational equity, but also implement solutions at our level, our local level. So using the all grant opportunities and funding opportunities that are out there, with this knowledge, with this global knowledge on solutions to really implement it at the local level. So in the agendas that we cover, I also mentioned sustainable finance, MDVs, international architecture reforms, but our activities, I'm not gonna repeat myself all on this, but we also very important topics are listed here. So we follow this, and what we haven't talked much about is Article 6, which is also the mechanism under the market and non-market approaches on how countries are going to be trading with each other or cooperating with each other in order to implement their NDCs. And this is going to be really relevant this next year, because the implementation process is going to start, be operationalized, and it's really into a conclusion where we actually see implementation taking place on this. And we need to make sure that there is no greenwashing or this affects both nature, indigenous communities, and our vulnerable communities. So we really need to be worrying about this place and to take a look with a critical eye, but also make sure that things are actually implemented. We also cover adaptation finance, which is really important for developed countries, and also loss and damage finance. So then we make sure that there is climate justice taking place as well, for the injustice of how development has been conceived in our world, and the human history and the colonial history that we have experienced in the past centuries and millennia. So we really need to make sure that this is a just and equitable for all members of this human world and the natural world as well. So there are a lot of considerations on, for example, what is debt justice, or what is ecological justice, to make sure that we can bring the enabling conditions so countries that are strangled by external debt, or that are is constrained to only focus on extractive processes, can also reach green and development, and they can take sure that this whole social and environmental aspects are bring into place when they're talking about development. We don't just do policy, we also do research. There are we had last year we developed 2 research reports on what will be the efforts on scaling climate finance for youth, and analysis needs analysis report. So we launched it last year during the Innovate for Climate Summit, the youth needs for climate finance, and then later the availability of climate finance for youth, when we really confirm that there's limited awareness and capacity building on how we can access climate finance. So really bring rough data into the negotiation table to be okay, we need more means of implementation, both money and capacities, and supporting platforms so we can effectively make the changes happen, and be those change makers that we everyone tells us that we are. But there are examples of how organizations. Thank you. I'll be rounding out very quick. I'm already out of time. So examples of organizations that are also doing things the organization I'm part of. but how can, like, for example, other initiatives can then fit to the work stream that we do. We had this academy, this global training program with the Global Youth Coalition, where 10,000 members from all over the world participated. We understood some gaps. We shared the knowledge, shared the interesting information and inputs and made opportunities for the working groups to have spaces to get inputs from the youth all around the world, to really like try to break the silo of what the people we usually talking about, but also getting inputs on what are the youth implementations taking place. So not just, blah, blah, blah and policy, but also how much climate action are we doing in our territories. And that really opened up a space, for example, in our working group to start a report on measuring impacts on youth, but also start understanding what are the needs for young people and their organizations in order to foster, more implementation and the sustainable aspects of their initiatives. And this is a program and a project we're working on in the working group, and you are welcome to join if you like to do research. So I set up this topics, but I don't think we have much time for that. But if you have any questions regarding this, please come forward now that we'll be talking. Yeah, we're also gonna have really soon an opportunity, yes, of course, on engaging at the high level panel of the ministers, the Nordic Council of Ministers for Clean Air, where we have like opportunities, for example, in online webinars to show our positions, but really be part of the discussion, the very technical discussion on, for example, what are the funding arrangements and what innovative financial instruments are to be set in place to really bring finance to really complicated topics like loss and damage, which is very critical for climate justice. And of course, also Article 6 and the Standing Committee on Finance, but I'm not going to go back on that because that was already covered. So to overcome all these existential threats mentioned, we need to shift the trillions. We need a new climate finance goal that actually puts and meets the financial needs of developing countries. And on the way to 2025, when we negotiate the successor of the FAIL 100, we really need to see, what are going to be the sources of funding and how can financial flows be aligned with climate goals and with the international architecture reform, alongside with the multi-development works. There's a lot of work that we had to do and be part of, and we need to make sure that these solutions are flexible and adaptive to the needs of developing countries, and really, put the pressure on grant-based finance to address loss and damage, adaptation, and biodiversity conservation. This is crucial, as I mentioned. The debt stress of developing countries are even more increased by climate change. So even on top of the injustice that was our world built upon, there's even more threats coming up with the changes. So we really need to make sure that we build a safe and just world for everyone. And parties, of course, need to be held accountable. So thank you very much. And I hope that this has inspired you in some way. And I will drop this links as well. How can you join a working group? How can you join Youngo? And it will be great to see you in other opportunities coming ahead. And yeah, please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Jen. Of course, we feel so inspired with all the presentations that you've given us and the opportunities there is for us to engage more within the process. We are happy to learn the various youth constituencies we have, and we encourage everyone to try and join one. We especially invite you to join the Youngo Finance and Market Working Group. And like Jen mentioned, we are looking forward to also finishing work on the Sustainable Finance Working Group, and we encourage you to join when the time is up. We've also had the opportunity to know the avenues and channels for youth engagement. Jen presented on them. You can still have them in your presentation. And the various working groups, both operational and thematic working groups, have also been introduced to us. And of course, the work of the constituency so far, or the working group so far, we have done a lot. And like Jen mentioned, we still will need support. And with the knowledge you have now, you can make meaningful contribution to all the submissions that we'll be calling you to help with. So We thank you very much, Jen. Your presentation was very, 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 very informative, and we appreciate the time. And sorry, we know you didn't have a lot of time to delve through all the things that you intended to do, but we are hopeful that once you are with us, we can still come back to you with the presentation we have to kind of get more insight into the issues that we need clarity on. So without wasting much time, does anybody have any burning questions or clarity you may want Jen to throw more light on quickly, just 5 minutes, so we can zoom into our graduation. Just 5 minutes. If you have any burning questions that can't wait, we are open for 5 minutes discussion on that.
You know what? Can I come here, Mary Jane?
Sure,
Because I see
Irene.
that some people said they have to log off. If you have 5 minutes after the graduation, perhaps we'll just quickly do that now so that others can join in whatever meetings they have. And then you can always just have the interactive conversation with us. We'll be here for a bit if Jen has the time. We literally dragged Jen out of his bed by, say, 4 o'clock this morning. Okay, so
Exactly.
it's our graduation. We're really excited to have hosted you all for the past 4 weeks. And from the feedback we've been getting, phenomenal. I recall when we just brought this up, when we thought this through as a working group, and we knew that it was very important that, you know, we start to equip young people ahead of COP 28 so that you have more meaningful engagement. And I trust that this capacity building 4 weeks intensive sessions, of which you would agree with us that we did a lot of work in bringing the best brains here. Can I have a witness here? Any hands, any thumbs up for us? Because the sets of people that we brought, it was not in Nigeria. You say it wasn't beans, meaning it wasn't easy. But thank you all for sticking through with us. Thank you all for your feedback. Thank you all for, you know, being with us all this while. We do appreciate it, and we trust that you would implement every single thing that you have learned during the session, during the 4 sessions, in the work you do, in your school curriculum, in everything you do, basically. If you have any more questions, you can always stay with us after the graduation. So it's time, drum rolls, it's time for our graduation. If you received the backdrop that I dropped, that we put earlier, please can we all have that on display? Then I'll hand over to Jen now, who will just teach you how to place the graduation
All right.
on.
I want you all also to
Jen,
put
right?
your hats on, so you can go to the settings, the options under your camera, and you can choose a virtual background, and when you open that window, you can also see where you can put your filters on videos, and you can
No, Jen, you have to take it easy with us. Yeah. So first step.
Okay,
Go
first step, start your video. Second step, go to the video options, and then go to choose a virtual background. And after that, you'll open up a window, and you have to click on where filter video.
Use a virtual background. Then do we
And
go to video?
Video filters. I think I have it in Spanish, so I don't know how it's for you guys, but so then you can choose from all the different options and props that you can put your camera on, and put graduation cap, so we can all take a picture using our new graduation.
Okay, video filters, I see that. Oh, all right. Oh, well, I'm not graduating, but then I have to put my graduation.
Oh, yeah,
Yay! So do we all have that? So you go to where you have your video option, that arrow, you open, you see the choose virtual background, you click on that. When you go to choose virtual background, you see background and effects. From my end, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is the 6th option under settings. Then you see virtual backgrounds and video filters. You click on video filters, and then you see the different kinds of hats. Yes. If you also want to include sunshades.
I don't have the hats here.
Oh no.
I don't have the hats, but
okay, so
you
we'll
can go
try
ahead.
we'll try to take the picture and then Photoshop you some hat in your head. How about that?
Exactly.
All right, perfect. All right.
Excellent, but I see most people
Let's
have
take
it. So yeah, this is beautiful.
All right. So I think I have
Then you're
everyone.
taking the photos, yeah?
I can take the photo. So like everyone on the count of 3, please smile to the camera so we can take our final picture. And of course,
I got
the
myself a
capacity
button.
building sessions are in its end, but we hopefully want you guys to engage in our following up, adding value activities that we will be telling you forward on the work stream. So there's more engagement for you guys, but of course you can feel now yourself graduated from our academy. Okay, so on the number of 3, 2, 1. Excellent. We got a picture. We got a picture, friends. I'm sending it here in the chat.
If
but
you have a
also-
makeshift button like I do, I literally just squeeze the notes on my desk.
Great. Okay, lovely friends. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking part of this opportunity, and thank you so much for existing and really trying to make a change in this world, because we really need everyone to work together to make this happen. Otherwise, there's like no habitable future. But yeah, I really believe that with our strength, and when we talk about youth empowerment, we don't say that youth doesn't have the power. We have the power to make the changes. We just need to channel this power into a direction we can push every member of society to make happen and be the most just and possible at the same time. So thank you very much, friends. Anyone that wants to take some remarks, the mic is open, the floor is open for anyone that wants to say something, some reflections, or otherwise you can also feel free to leave, but I want to have a chance to hear what you guys have to say as well. So Olivia, I see your hand up.
I'm so sorry, I have to run. I've got another meeting, but thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to meet everyone virtually. Hopefully we'll meet someday in person. And I'm always free to reach out to. And yeah, just again, what a privilege. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else want to say something? Thank you. I see so many thank yous in the chat.
Yeah. So Jen, I think maybe one of our participants could just step in for the rest of their colleagues to give us some sort of vote of thanks for how far they have come. That would be really nice to
Oh yes, in terms of the certificates, we didn't mention for those people would collate based on the attendance. I know that some people who were not able to make some of the classes as a result of work engagements and all of that, they reached out. So for those who thought it best to reach out with cogent reasons, we would consider, but all the terms and conditions regarding certificates for this training, we still stand by strongly. Thank you, everyone. It was beautiful hosting you.
Yay.
So if you have questions for any of us, Jen, myself, Mary Jane, you can just stick around and, ask. We're here for the next. Jen, how long can you wait for?
I am free. I want to really use this time to engage with you, friends. I know you might have questions, comments, and I want to really hear.
So much.
I think I saw Itoa raised her hand, but I don't know if she still wants to ask her question.
No, thank you, Elaine. I just wanted to ask again if for being part of the Yango, you have maybe some registration fees that we are going to pay, this kind of question.
No. This space is completely free, and there's no conditions or requirements for people to engage. You just need to fill up the membership form that we sent, and we are going to be sending in the chat as well, and the group chat. And sometimes it takes a little bit to be accepted, but I also left like the chat group of our working group if you want to start engaging immediately. All the projects are open for people to join. And if you have ideas on projects you also want to share with the youth, you are free to do it as well. This is a place for shared leadership and an open space for everyone. So we will love to encourage that.
Would also love to encourage that when you decide to be a member, you are an active member. Okay, very important. Very important.
Okay, thank you.
Between what is possible, of course.
We would appreciate, you being active.
Anyone else wants to comment?
Hello everyone, this is Elena. So ahead of COP28, also, I mean, Jen is struggling to bring a region.
Sorry, I did not hear the question. Maybe you can type it.
I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I was saying, so ahead of COP28, if there's anything that anybody feels that the working group should look at, should consider, in terms of the solutions that we're making, and everything, please feel free to do that on Jen or Romy or Irene or anybody that's to join the work. So yeah. So to be sure that we're not missing out on any important points, even as we get it home.
Yeah, I had trouble understanding. Sorry, but you can maybe type it in the chat or in the group chat, and feel free to message me at the private way as well. So I have a Bandana.
Hello, thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a pleasure being in your session, and thank you so much for Youngo UNFCCC for arranging this session. Apart from all these obligations, I would like to start from a trivial question of the requirement to get an attendance. I mean, the certification is 3 sessions out of 4, right?
Yeah, that was what was initially, and of course, if you have legitimate ways in order to prove that you were in distress or something that you can prove us that you could not make it, we can also take a personal look about that. But please feel free to engage with our director Irene or in the chat as well, and we can take this as a private matter as well.
No problem. I just attended everything. I wanted a clarification because I didn't take a screenshot for my own confirmation on the second one, but everything else was there. But I know I attended it. I just wanted to confirm if I'm still in the safe place. So sorry. And with that being said, I would like to get more on a personal question as to how personally I can be involved in the in one of your youth constituencies, which are still in the pre-draft stage, as you said, regarding the Sustainable Finance and Youth Coalition. So before I get into that, my background has been in sustainable finance. And can I continue? May I proceed?
Continue. Yes, continue.
Please continue.
Yeah. So I have been working with the Climate Action Champions Network from the US under the US state government and Observer Research Foundation. And apart from that, I am currently pursuing my undergrad degree in Japan on a scholarship. But how do I say that? My origin is from India. Is there any way in which that I could enhance my participation in the Climate Finance Forum? For example, on the first or second session, if I'm not wrong, we had somebody from the United Nations Stock Exchange, a sustainable stock exchange, tell us about how it works. But I had, mentioned in the form as in what are the things that we have to do to be where you are, and how do we enhance our capacity to be able to work in such a level in the coming years. And I personally wanted to know, apart from being, part of the Youngo, apart from now being inducted into part of the Working in Finance and Markets Working Group, how else can we be part of this youth constituencies that has more particular focus on what I am personally interested in? and it depends on each and every person. So
Okay,
is there
so
any
you,
mentorship that we could be given, for the youth?
I mean, the mentorship can occur like in spaces like this, or the working group calls that happen every month, and sometimes more than once a month. There are subgroups under our working group. For example, we have a subgroup on sustainable finance chit chat, if that's something you want to cover as well, and like the opportunities to engage with the new sustainable finance youth coalition will be also shared in the upcoming weeks, because it's still like on pre-draft development. So like we are meeting regularly with the heads of the constituencies, the focal points from the different constituencies, in order to have the first steps on defining some like objectives that we want to compromise our constituencies working forward, and then open up the space for people. And we're going to start from capacity building to then writing policy, and then launching hopefully this sustainable finance at COP this year. So yeah,
Looking forward to it.
bear with us
Thank you.
so you can engage in these spaces, and feel free to ask questions in the chat.
Thank you.
Margarita?
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for this. I feel like this was so it was really fulfilling, it was really interesting, I learned a lot. And I saw that one of your slides was about like loss and damage, but unfortunately you weren't able to cover it. So I just wanted to know whether like the working group is working on like this topic of the loss and damage fund towards COP, and maybe if you can just summarize, like, I don't know, like if it's possible, but what exactly is your focus, because I'm really interested on that. So, and I've been also working on some stuff that are covering.
Amazing. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so essentially what the political aspects are covered by another working group, which is the loss and damage working group. But what we cover, and we build a common space between our both working groups, is that we focus mainly on the financial aspects. So what financial instruments brings the sources to the loss and damage fund, and following the negotiations tracks, what they're deciding what are going to be the funding arrangements. So is this new fund going to be a standalone fund? Is it going to fall under the existing financial mechanisms like the GEF, the GCF? Is it going to be a fund that is going to be, a trust fund from the World Bank or other UN trust fund? So there are different options, and parties aren't currently negotiating. They just had their meeting in the Dominican Republic, the TC3 that it's called, the third meeting for the transitional committee, and essentially this is the place that they're discussing. But we're really mad about how the discussion are being played, because we are like a little bit left out of the discussion. We have very few opportunities to engage with the process, but we also are following closely, and we created this submission, and there are also like policy paper and what financial instruments we think are good, and how to set like a specific quality of how loss and damage should be financed. What we would expect at the very minimum to something be considered as a best practice towards financing that. I also wanted to take the chance, if you have any follow-up come up, I also wanted to make the chance that this Youngo sometimes is not that inclusive for everyone. So because it's very technical, because it's very, also in English, so not all countries speak English, but through our LCOIs and our ARCOIs, we can really like build a bridge. And we see this year, for example, in Latin America, where we are like also the Latin America, that ARCOI is working on this the statement this year, and they open up this spaces to do their policy, and if we interact both in the working groups and our ARCOIs, we personally can bring this processes together. And I think this is a really nice mission for you youngsters to also take into consideration, where we can feed up the positions made in our regional and local and national spaces into the workflow of the working group. So we make sure that we don't just position ourselves for the long term, but also following up each negotiation process. And so we are like consistent, and we bring provide substantial contributions all the way. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Pretty sure you're all tired at this point, but feel free to. Oh, we have Lydia hand as well.
Hi, sorry, just jumping real quick. Thank you so much for the amazing presentations. It was very insightful. Just one question on the Sharm dialogue. What's the latest progress in the negotiations, and what do you think will be discussed, and what are kind of the contentious points for the next meeting?
All right, so the Sharm dialogues are not a negotiation. They are a space for all parties and non-party stakeholders to, bring together their positions in order to feed what is going to be the negotiations of the work stream of the new collective quantified goal for next year. So there's many different tensions regarding how do we interpret the article, the 21.c article, because some parties essentially, consider all financial flows as part of how Noah said, turning all finance into climate finance. There's a very big consensus drawn up with the high-level minister dialogues that happened at last COP. Before the last COP, that was a consensus of the reform of the financial architecture, but also the need to bring the private sector together. So there are tensions on, like Noah said as well, on what are the mandates that the UN can provide to call to really urge these institutions to be reformed, and the private finance, sustainable finance to really reach a systemic change in how the financial system works, because everything must be consistent to a world where climate change and the climate and ecological crisis is essentially a very key aspect of how can we understand sustainability, and what will be another thing are what we're going to be the potential intended and unintended consequences of what the actions are gonna look like, and how can we safeguard some potential impacts that this might happen, because of course naturally there are positions from the really big corporate sector where if aligning flows means taking money from making more expensive extractive economies and fossil fuels, for example, then how can we make it sure that there's incentives for them to transition at the same time? Because this, at the end of the day, who pays the bill for, let's say, of this transitions are the poorest in our society, and we need to make sure that we put safeguards, and so the transition is just for people to not suffer at the bottom level. So I wish I could answer more about this, and if you engage in our working group, you'll have the chance to also meet the other youngsters that were there at the last Sharm dialogues, and also a good opportunity will be to have concise questions to send to the secretariat and other key stakeholders to really have answers to these questions and be prepared for the Sharm El-Sheikh dialogue that I imagine you are going to participate.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will engage with you.
Great, looking forward to that. All right, friends, I think we're done for today, unless someone has a last question. It's been a great honor and really nice engagement in this space, and really looking forward to continue our engagement in our working group and other spaces that we might encounter ourselves, since, you know, the climate space is really small. Thank you.
Okay, Jane, thank you so much. I think, yeah,
Thank you
at this point,
all.
we should be drawing down the curtains. Yeah. Irene, you are there. So I think we are done for now. And we thank
Yeah, yeah.
everyone for joining.